two quick books. Oh, this is one of them. It's a bit more of a junior level book, and it's got some great tips and suggestions. So that's one. The other one is this one, Playmaker's Advantage. This one is more intense. It's good. In particular, it's got 3 chapters in the back, which specifically speak to athletes about preparing for competition, how to train. The front end, it's got a lot of science in it. If you're like a numbers research person, it like proves that your mind has a big impact on the way that you perform and play. But one tip that it does say, it says that practicing only accounts for 12% of your overall improvement. Because everyone thinks that like we need to practice more, we need to get on the court more. But scientifically, according to this book, it only accounts for 12% of your overall improvement. So lots of other things get thrown in there to help you become a better athlete, elite athlete. All right. So in talking about growth, and like I said, I'll kind of fast forward through it, but I think we can probably all agree that Naomi's definition of it, that optimizing your own performance or pursuing, continuously pursuing improvement or, critically examining yourself, all cycle around that notion of growth. When you think of the term growth, like your growth mindset, how do you characterize that for yourself? Do you think of it as a pursuit of improvement?
Sometimes I think of it in terms of improvement, whereas other times I just think of it as basically what you said, adding new tools.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, sometimes growth is just trying something new. And so it's like growing that comfort zone. So even though it's not necessarily like, oh, I've improved in this measurable way, or I'm getting towards a specific goal of like shooting better or being more educated on a certain topic. Like I tried a dance class, and that was something that like I'd wanted to do, but was too afraid to. And so I feel like there was growth of my comfort zone. And even though it's not like a skill or something like tangible, it was growth in that general sense. So comfort zone growth, I guess, is something I think about over improvement sometimes.
I still think though it does have a direct connection to the kind of the ideal that you have for yourself around your character, right? So if you want to be somebody that is more risk taking or more work outside of your comfort zone, right? Outside of your bubble, then that ties to a vision that you have of yourself that is an improved vision of where you're currently at. So even though maybe something insignificant in the scope of things like cooking or playing guitar or learning to dance, right? They may seem insignificant, but if you really reflect on them, they're tied to a better version that you have of yourself in your mind, right? Characteristics. Because when I think of growth, I always tie it back to that character side. It always has an impact on who I am going to be as a person as a result of going through something, right? Or going through some sort of form of growth. And I'm going to give some words of encouragement and some words of caution when it comes to growth, because there's a relationship that's very delicate between growth and health. So if you look at it in the business context, you have companies like relentlessly pursuing growth, more employees, bigger product SKUs, more stores, whatever the case is, right? Growth, 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 growth. But it always comes at a cost of health for the organization. So it stretches the resources, it challenges relationships internally, it shakes up customers. Like, if you think about it in the business sense, growth isn't always healthy. So you have to balance the two of them together. And that's certainly been the experience that I've had in my life. I mean, there's one story that I'll share, that I started a consulting company when I used to live in Toronto. And previously, my entire persona was connected to growth, overambitious, take no prisoners, growth, 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 learn, 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 learn. And it had a disastrous effect on my life, like my health, my finances, my family life, my relationships with my family and my core family and my extended family. Like it took a real toll, even though at the same time I was growing and putting myself in new situations and trying to change who I was just so that I could grow. It ended up taking a huge toll on the health of my life in so many ways. So I definitely encourage you to grow, and especially when it comes to your character. But I also want to caution you in that it does have a cost. If you go tip the balance too far in the growth area, you're going to pay a price in the health of your life or the foundation. And that's even true when you talk about basketball. If you're trying to push too hard to develop one certain skill or in a certain way, then the fundamentals of your game could take a hit, or the relationship that you have with the other players, or your confidence, other things could fail on you to some degree because you're pursuing that. I definitely want to make sure that there's a balance there. The other thing I wanted to say about growth was that it's really hard. Like it's really difficult. And I think, Claire, you hit it, because if you imagine yourself in like a bubble, so one of those things that you used to blow when you were a kid, like, shiny little bubble. So that bubble represents your life. And if you don't ever pop your arm outside of that bubble, right, or try to break that bubble while it's still delicately forming, it will eventually turn into a balloon. And then you're going to have a really hard time getting out of it. So you're going to be pushing against the edges of that balloon, but the confines of kind of the environment that you've created for yourself will continue to fight back against you trying to stretch outside of that. So while you're still in your bubble and it's forming and it's still fragile, that's the opportunity to pop out of that before it gets too difficult and becomes a balloon. So that would be a sign of encouragement. But it takes a lot of honesty and a lot of, like we talked about tonight, self-awareness, which is not always fun, right? It's not always fun to look in the mirror and see where your gaps are and the things that you know, or the weaknesses that you have. Like Claire and I are running and our bodies are aching. Like I'm looking in the mirror thinking, oh, I don't know if I still got what I used to have. I may need to grow in another way to stay healthy and fit. I may not be able to use that same thing I used to do. And the key point that I want to touch on in this hard work area is that you need to be intentional. Like everything you do needs to be done kind of for a reason, and there should be a why and a where to in your mind. So you know what you're good at, you know what you love to do. Push down those paths even further as a way of growing. I mean, I would argue, this may be controversial, Claire, because it maybe goes against a little bit of what you said before, but I would almost argue doing things like baking or playing the guitar, and my wife cautioned me to say this earlier, but those could sometimes be distractions from really areas that you could be using more effectively, right? Using your time more intentionally or effectively. I know in my day, the things that I could use, I could claim as maybe growth, but they might be spinning my wheels. And then I know other areas that I'm shying away from that I should be going aggressively at. And that would be real character development, but it's a bit hard. And it might be a bit uncomfortable. So there's always that in the mix, right? But I would say that being intentional about your growth is going to serve you well as you continue to grow. And it's going to make sure that you use your time and your talents effectively and efficiently. So yeah, the other example is, so I told you about my business, starting my business, and the mistakes I made along that path in terms of growth. But another area that I had since learned from is, I mean, I've been a coach now for 10 years. You would not recognize me 10 years ago as a coach. I was a disaster. Like I was bringing in old thinking because that's what I knew from my previous playing days. And a lot of the way that I coached was more about me than it was about the players. So I had to continually grow as a coach. Now I made a choice. I mean, I could have aggressively pursued growth and taken it off the charts, but what I wanted to do, to come back to this balance idea, is I wanted to respect everybody else that was around me. I didn't just want to ditch them and head off. So caring for the players over multiple years, the assistant coaches I had, respecting the commitment that my family had made to let me do to be a coach was all very important to me, and it checked me a little bit in terms of how aggressively I pushed on the growth because I wanted to still honor everybody that was around me. So that's just, I guess, hitting again on the point that there is a balance and there's a cost to growth, and just be wary of that when you start to pursue something that looks as though it's really a good idea. So two things I'll just leave you with here. I don't know if I've ever, outside of Claire, talked about my winning the day mentality, winning the day philosophy, but just very quickly, every day for me, I try to be as intentional as I can. And I have this notion of, or this idea in my mind of what it's going to take for me to, at the end of the day, say that I won the day. And I've outlined three things. And this is directly tied to my mindset towards growth because all of these things are forward moving for me. So the first one is my faith. So I'm a follower of Jesus, and there cannot be a day that goes by that I do not do something to strengthen that relationship that I have with my faith. So it could be something as small as just reading the Bible. It could be prayer related. It could be service related, some sort of mission work. Whatever the case is, there's something that needs to happen in my relationship with Jesus every day for that faith category. Second is my family. So I have things that are important to me and the way that I want to be defined as a father and as a parent, as a father and a husband. So sacrifice is really important, love and sacrifice. So every day there's got to be a sacrifice that I make for my family. And even though it's something that I'm giving up or time that I'm giving up or whatever it is, it still is growing me and growing my character towards something else. So I still consider it to be growth. The last one is future. I have to do something for somebody else, for somebody else's future every day. So if it's an encouragement to somebody, I'm in touch with a lot of players that I coach, and I'm always very quick to say, to get them to be accountable to their own goals or to highlight something that they do really well as a way of encouraging them to, get better or grow themselves. So those are my three categories for winning the day. So the faith, family, and future. And if I do that, then I consider myself to have grown. The other thing is, and this maybe is more of a challenge for you guys, is talk to your parents and your grandparents and ask them these questions. Sometimes it's hard to ask them some questions about themselves because it might bring up other things. But if you talk to them about growth over the course of their life, mistakes they've made, decisions they've made that have led to growth, this is a really great topic to get them to open up about their experiences in life. They would probably love to reflect on what they've gone through in their lives and how they've grown or what they've used to grow. So those are my what did you say, next level nuggets? I love that. Next level, here they are, the next level nuggets.
No, that's good. Honestly, well, Stuart, when you mentioned that to me earlier and just the whole like asking your parents stuff, um, that's honestly been an enhancement that my boyfriend has like brought into my life because he's a great question asker.
Mm-hmm.
Is very intentional about that to grow himself and to just grow relationships. And since he has interacted with my parents, I've learned stuff from them that I, you know, obviously could have learned in the past 28 years and have learned a lot more in the last year because he asks those questions. So
Yeah.
retweet on Stuart's suggestion.